How are you? I'm hoping you're doing amazing. You look amazing today. Have a great day or night. Just sleep well. Make sure you drink some water. Grab a snack, do something. Have a good life. I don't no depressos here, even though all the characters we're reading about has some kind of mental issue, but it's okay. We all do, right? Especially if you're watching me. Anyway, hi. I'm sorry that I'm so everywhere right now. It's because I haven't done much today. I was very active yesterday. Like, I was dancing around and everything. I had a lot of fun yesterday. But I'm trying to find. At the very beginning, it talks about, like, he's known for deaths, murders, and disappearances, famous creepypasta, slashes and gore, arsons, creepypasta classics, all kinds of other stuff. And it's just like, I want the backstory, man. Let's see if we can find his backstory. Hi! Welcome! We're learning about Toby today. Okay, so we're learning about his backstory currently. I'm gonna turn down this music a little, because I'm getting distracted by it. I have ADHD. It's not terrible, so it's not like I'm medicated for it, but I do have it. So if that shows, I'm very sorry, because I'm sure it will. I'm gonna change my missions. Anyway, let's see here. There we go. Hi. You're slipping. I take back what I said. That's not okay. Okay, hang on. Let me move that pillow. We have silk right now, and it's not working out, man. It's not. It just is not. Oh, God. This is probably gonna get cut out of the video, or at least most of it. I'm hoping. I'm hoping that editor me is going to be smart and edit most of this out. If I don't, I'm sorry. I am so sorry, man. Anyway, hi guys. I know it's very late on posting. It's probably gonna be like 8 p.m. by the time that this is posted. Usually it's not. I promise. It'll be posted usually by like 2 or 3. I've just hated today. Today was kind of crappy. It's okay though. Hi guys. I hope you guys are feeling amazing, unlike me. So, I also have a Discord, which I will put in a post as a link or in the description of this video. I have 2. So if you're interested, I have one for my books, and I'll mark these, by the way. I have one for my videos every time that they're posted. There'll be a thing about it, and you can always ask me for, like, anything that you guys want to have on my stuff can be on there, and I'll probably answer a lot quicker than my YouTube videos. But I'm gonna try to put every single person's, everything. Like, any creepypasta you want me to do that I haven't done, I will put on there. I'm gonna start eventually doing clips and stuff as well, about whenever I start posting. So before I do a live stream, I'll come on here and I'll be like, hey guys, by the way, I'm doing a live stream on reality. In like, however many minutes or like what time. I might eventually start using Hyper, if I can. Um, anyway, so the long road home seemed to go on and on. The road continued to stretch in front of the vehicle endlessly. The light that shone through the branches of the tall, green trees danced across the window in random patterns, and every once in a while, obnoxiously shining in your eyes. The surroundings were full of deep green trees forming a forest around the road. The only sound was the sound of the car's engine as it traveled down the path. It was peaceful and like a serene feeling. Although the ride seemed like a nice one, it lacked every form of nice from its 2 passengers. The middle-aged woman behind the steering wheel had neat short brown hair that fit her complexion quite well. She wore a green V-neck t-shirt and a pair of blue jeans. Diamond stud earrings decorated each of her ears, which practically showed from behind her haircut. Partially. I'm being stupid, because I didn't know which one it was. I'm sorry. Don't yell at me, please. Okay, sorry, I lost my spot. Partially showed from behind her haircut. She had deep green eyes which her shirt brought out, and the lighting seemed to make them more noticeable. There wasn't anything significant about her appearance. She looked like any other average mother you would see on TV shows and the like, however. The one thing that made her different than the average mothers was the dark bags she had under her eyes. Her facial expression was gloomy and sad, although she genuinely looked like someone who smiled a lot. She would sniffle every once in a while, and occasionally glance in the rearview mirror to look at her son in the back seat, who was hunched over partially, with his arms held tight around his chest and his head pressed against the cold window. The boy lacked any normal appearance, and anyone could plainly see there was something wrong with him. His messy brown hair went every which way, and the luminescent lighting brought out his pale, almost gray skin. His eyes were dark, unlike his mother's, and he wore a white t-shirt and scrub pants that had been provided for him by the hospital. The clothes he had worn before were so shredded and blood-stained that they weren't wearable anymore. The right side of his face bared a few cuts, along with a split eyebrow. His right arm was bandaged all the way to the shoulder, which had been shredded when his right side hit the shattered glass. His injuries appeared to be painful, when in reality he couldn't feel anything. This was just one of the glories of being him. One of the challenges he had to face while growing up was growing up with a rare disease that caused him to be completely numb toward pain. Never before had he felt himself get hurt. He could have lost an arm and felt nothing. The other major disorder he had faced, which was the one that deemed him many insulting nicknames in the short time he attended grade school before he switched to homeschooling, was his Tourette's syndrome. I didn't know he had Tourette's. That's why he has so many tics. That's probably why he's called Ticci Toby instead of like Tizzy. But I still call him Tizzy. Don't ask, I'm weird. I have my own weird habits. I think you guys would too. And I'm sure that there's more than just me saying Tizzy. Until they find this out, and they probably say Ticky. But anyway. Yeah, it's definitely Ticky. I'm sorry. Please don't kill me. Anyway. Which caused him to tick and twitch in ways he couldn't control. He would crack his neck uncontrollably and twitch every once in a while. The kids would tease him and call him Ticky Toby, and they mocked him with exaggerating. I should probably start doing that so that way it doesn't make my stuff go to like, making me put 18 plus or something and stuff like that, or like warnings. I'm gonna start adding trigger warnings, even though they're really annoying and they're probably gonna be like, trigger warning! But, yeah, I'm gonna do that now. When the surroundings gave way to a familiar neighborhood, they were both more than ready to get out of the car and step back into their own home. It was an older neighborhood with quaint little houses all next to each other. The car drove in front of a blue house with white window panes. They both quickly noticed the old vehicle that was parked in front of the house and the familiar figure that stood in the driveway. Toby felt automatic anger and frustration take over him at the sight of his father who wasn't there. His mother pulled the car up in the driveway beside him before turning off the engine and preparing to step out and face her husband. "Why is he here?" Toby said quietly as he looked back at his mother who reached to open the car door. "He's your father, Toby. He's here because he wants to see you," his mother responded in a monotone voice, trying to sound less shaky. Yet couldn't drive up to the hospital to see Lyra before she died. That's really cool. Oh. Yay! I got boom booms. I don't know why I got boom booms. Wait, did it leave confetti on the floor? Oh, it didn't. That's sad. I was excited. He was drunk that night, honey. He couldn't drive. Yeah, when is he not? Um, Toby pushed the door open before his mother and stumbled out onto the driveway when he met his father's gaze. Before looking down at his feet with a stern expression, his mother stepped out behind him and met her husband's eyes before walking around the car. His father opened up his arms expecting a hug from his wife, but she walked past him and put her arm around Toby's shoulder and started leading him inside. "Connie," her husband began in a raspy voice. "What, no welcome home hug, huh?" She ignored her husband's obnoxious words and walked past him with her arm under her son. "Hey, he's 16. He can walk by himself." His father began to follow them in. "He's 17, Connie glared back at him before opening the door to the house and stepping inside. "Toby, why don't we get you in your room to rest, okay? I'll come get you when dinner's ready." "No, I'm 16. I can walk by myself," Toby said sarcastically and glared back at his father before stumbling up the small staircase and turning into his room, where he slammed the door violently. His little room didn't have much in it, just a small bed, a dresser, a window, and his walls had a few picture frames of his family, back when they were a family. Before his father became an alcoholic and acted violently toward the rest of his family. Toby remembered when he was arguing with his mom and he grabbed her by the hair and shoved her to the floor. And when Lyra had tried to break it up, he pushed her and she hit her back on the corner of the kitchen counter. Toby could never forgive him for what he did to his mother and sister. Never. Toby didn't care how much his father beat him down. He couldn't feel it anyway. What he did care about was how he intentionally hurt the other two people he cared about. And when he was waiting in the hospital where his sister took her last breaths, the only one who didn't rush there was his dad. Toby stood by the window and looked out at the street. He could have sworn he saw something out of the corner of his eye, but quickly blamed it on the meds he was on. When dinner time had come and his mother called up to him, Toby came down the stairs and hesitantly sat at the table across from his father. In between his mother was an empty chair. It was quiet as his father picked up their last. Why'd I say last? There is no last there. It was quiet as his parents picked up their food, but Toby refused to eat. Instead, he just watched his dad with a blank stare. His mother caught on to his staring and elbowed him slightly. Toby looked over at her slightly and then down at his uneaten food, which he didn't touch. Toby laid in bed. He pulled his covers over his head and stared at the window. He was tired, but there was no way he could fall asleep. He couldn't. There was too much to think about. He had been debating on whether or not to follow his mother's directions and forgive his father, or continue holding a grudge with his boiling hatred. He heard his door creak open, and his mother padded into the room and sat on the bed next to him. She reached over and rubbed his back, which had been turned to her. I know it's hard, Toby, trust me, I understand, but I promise you it will get better. When is he going to leave? Toby said with an innocent tone in his shaky voice. Connie let her gaze fall down to her feet. I don't know, honey. He's staying as far as I know, she replied. Toby didn't respond. He just continued to look forward at the wall, holding his damaged arm near his chest. After a few minutes of silence, his mother sighed before she leaned in to kiss his cheek and stood up to walk out of the room. Good night, she said as she closed the door. The hours passed slowly, and Toby couldn't quit tossing and turning. Every time he let his imagination take over, he heard the screaming of tires, the screaming of his sister, and how he uncontrollably jerked in bed. He threw off his cover, and lying on his back, he pulled the pillow over his face and cried into it. He could hear his own pitiful weeping. He would have been screaming and crying if he didn't press his pillow over his face. After a few seconds, he threw the pillow off his face and sat up hunched over, holding his head and breathing roughly. Tears streaming from his eyes. He couldn't help but cry. He tried to keep it in, but he couldn't stop the whining and whimpering as he sat there shaking. He inhaled before he stood up and walked around his bed to the window and peered out, taking deep breaths, trying to calm down. He rubbed his eyes and looked out at the group of tall pine trees across the street. He stopped suddenly, and his gaze slowly centered on something, standing under the streetlight. He heard ringing in his ears, and he couldn't look away. The figure stood beside the streetlight, about 2 feet shorter than it did. Long arms draped at its sides as it stared up at him with non-existing eyes. The figure had no facial features to speak of, no eyes, no mouth, no nose, yet it held Toby's hypnotized stare, seemingly peering into his very being. The ringing in his ears only grew louder and louder each second he stared before suddenly it all went black. The next morning, Toby woke in his bed. He felt different. He wasn't tired at all. And when he consciously woke up, it felt like he had been lying there for hours. He had no thoughts flowing through his mind. He sat up slowly and stumbled over to the wall, but when he stood, he automatically felt dizzy. He stumbled to the doorway and walked down the stairs. His parents were sitting at the table. His father was tuned into the small TV that sat on the countertop, and his mother was reading the newspaper. She quickly looked over, and when she felt Toby's presence looming behind her, "Well, good morning, sleepyhead. You've been sleeping forever," she greeted him with a hesitant smile. Toby slowly looked at the clock and noticed that it was 12:30 p.m. "I made you breakfast, but it got cold. I was going to wake you up, but I felt you needed sleep." Her expression fell from happy to worry as her son resisted responding to her. "Are you all right?" Toby stumbled over and sat by his father. He felt as if he was on idle and had no control over his actions. He was seeing everything he did, but didn't register it in his brain. He reached out to his father's arm, but his hand ended up getting slapped. His father turned to him abruptly and pushed his chair over with his foot. "Don't touch me, boy!" he yelled. His mother stood up. All right, knock that off. That is the last thing we need.
Why was that spicy?
Anyway, days went by and things continued on as they were. Connie spent most of her time cleaning the house, and her rude husband spent most of the time ordering her around. It was just like how it used to be before the crash. Toby really never left his room. He would sit in his bed and tremble. Anyway, Toby never really left his room. He would sit in his bed and tremble. His mind would wander, but his thoughts changed too fast to be remembered. He would pace around his small room like a caged animal or stare out the window. The unhealthy cycle continued. Connie continued to be pushed around by her husband, being way too submissive to him, and Toby remained in his room. Before he could think twice, he would begin to chew on his hands, tearing the flesh from his fingers. He would gnaw his hands until they bled. When his mother walked in on him while he was doing so, she reacted horribly. She rushed him downstairs and grabbed the first aid kit, wrapping his hands in bandages. Afterwards, she demanded that he would never leave her side again. Toby isolated himself so much that he grew to hate being around others. His memory grew glitchy as well. He'd start missing memory of minutes, hours, days, and so on. He would begin talking nonsense about things completely unrelated to the conversations he would have. He'd go off about seeing things, sharks in the sink as he washed the dishes, hearing crickets in his pillow, and seeing ghosts outside his bedroom window. His mother grew so anxious about his mental health that she decided it would be a good idea for him to talk to a professional about what he was feeling. Connie walked Toby into the building, holding his hand and guiding him in. She walked him up to the front desk and began talking to the lady who sat behind it. Mrs. Rogers? Yes, that's me. We're here to see Dr. Oliver. I'm here with Toby Rogers. Yes, right this way. The lady stood and led him down a long hallway. Toby looked at the framed artwork down the halls and tuned into the sound of the lady's high heels on the hardwood floor. She opened the door to a room with a table and 2 chairs. If we can get him to sit in here for a few minutes, I'll get the doctor. She smiled and held the door open. Toby stumbled into the room and sat down at the table. He looked over at his mother and the lady before the door slowly shut behind them. He looked around the room before he held up his tightly bandaged hands and began to bite at the bandages to unwrap his hands, but he was interrupted as soon as the door swung open and a young woman in a black and spotted dress with light blonde hair stepped in, holding a clipboard and pen. Hi, Toby, she asked with a smile. Toby looked up at her and nodded. Nice to meet you, Toby. My name is Dr. Oliver. She put out her hand for him to shake, but hesitantly pulled away when she noticed his bandaged hands. Oh, she smiled nervously before clearing her throat and sitting in the chair across the table from him. So, I'm going to try and ask you for a few questions. Try to answer them as honestly as possible, okay? She placed her clipboard down on the table. Toby nodded slowly and held his restrained hands in his lap. She placed her clipboard down on the table. Toby nodded slowly and held his restrained hands in his lap. How old are you, Toby? 17, he responded quietly. She wrote that down on paper that was clipped on the clipboard. What is your full name? Toby Aaron Rogers. When is your birthday? April 28th. I said something else. Hang on, wait. Okay, I'm going insane. Anyway, who is your immediate family? Toby paused for a minute before answering the question. My mom, my dad, and my sister. I heard about your sister, dear. I'm really sorry. Her expression faded into a sad, pity-filled look. Toby nodded. Do you remember anything from the crash, Toby? Toby looked away from her. His mind went blank for a minute. He looked down at his lap, and in the surrounding area, he heard a faint ringing sound. His eyes widened, and he froze in place. Toby, the counselor asked. Toby, are you listening? Toby felt a shiver go down his spine. A shiver? Okay. Felt a shiver go down his spine until he froze once again and slowly looked over out the little window through the door, where he saw it, a dark, featureless figure, peering in at him. He stared, eyes widened. The ringing grew louder and louder until suddenly the loud voice of the counselor broke his trance. Toby! She yelled. Toby jumped and fell sideways out of his chair and backed up into the corner. Dr. Oliver stood up, holding her clipboard to her chest. A surprised look in her eyes. Toby met her eyes again. His breath hitched as he twitched. That night Toby lay in bed. His eyes were dazed as he stared straight up at his ceiling. He could feel himself begin to doze off when he heard the scattering of footsteps down the hallway. He sat up and looked towards the hallway, his door wide open. There was no light, and everything was lit with the luminescent blue glow of the moon through his window. leaving a cold lighting. I'm so sorry. I'm tired. Anyway, I've been streaming for 30 minutes, guys. Oh god, how long is this video gonna be? Anyway, he stood up and slowly made his way toward the doorway when suddenly the door, which previously was wide open, slammed in his face. He gasped and fell back. He was out of breath when he hit the ground, and he began breathing heavily, his eyes wide open. He waited for a few seconds before getting back on his feet. He reached out and grasped the cold door handle with his bandaged hand, and it creaked open. He looked out in the dark hallway and tiptoed out of his room. The window at the end of the hallway lit up the darkness with blue moonlight as he padded his way down. He could hear footsteps rustling around him and faint giggling, followed by the pitter-patter of small feet, which sounded like a child had run in front of him, giggling and running around. The hallway was a lot longer than he remembered. It seemed endless, like the ride home from the hospital. He heard the door creak in front of him. "Mom?" He had called in his shaky voice. Hang on, I'm sorry. I need to move. Ooh, okay. Suddenly a door slammed behind him and he jumped and turned around. Behind him he heard a long, eerie groan that sounded like a croak right in his ear. He turned around as fast as he could and was suddenly face to face with none other than his dead sister. Her eyes were clouded white, her skin pale, the right side of her jaw dangling there by tissue and muscle. Trigger warning. Glass protruding from her forehead, black blood leaking down her face, her blonde hair pulled up in a ponytail as it always was, and she was wearing her gray t-shirt and athlete shorts, which were dirty and spotted with blood. Her legs were bent in ways they shouldn't be. She stood emitting a long croaking noise only an inch away from Toby's face. Toby yelped and fell back. "Ah!" He started to crawl backward away from her, but he was unable to break the eye contact he held with her blank, dead eyes. He dragged himself backward until he backed up into something. He stopped for a second. Everything was dead silent except for his heavy breathing and crying. He slowly looked up to meet a blank face of a tall, dark figure, the same figure that stood over him now. Behind the tall, dark mass were rows of children, looking to range from 3 to 10 years old, their eyes completely black and dark black blood leaking from their eye sockets. Trigger warning still, by the way. I'll eventually put a time mark on the video, I promise, where it's going to be like, this is a trigger warning. This is the end of the trigger warning. I promise I'll do it. He screamed and stood up as fast as he could, only to be tripped by dark black tendrils that wrapped. Why don't you, type in chat how your day was. Just tell me a little bit. I'm a supportive person. And then go look at that link in the description and join my Discord while you got a minute too. Because this is going to take a second because I was really far down. So, that wrapped around his ankle. He fell straight on his stomach and got the wind knocked out of him. He tried to scream, but he couldn't make a sound. He wheezed out before it all went back. Toby woke with a start. He screamed out and sat up as fast as he could, completely short of breath. He wheezed out and held his chest. It was just a dream, just a dream. He lay back down on his bed and rolled over on his side. It felt like weight had been lifted off his chest as he took in deep breaths. He stood up and padded over to his window. He saw nothing. Nobody was out there. No ghosts, no figures, no nothing. He heard the rustling and coughing of his father outside the doorway. His door was closed. He walked over and opened it, looking out the hallway once again. He padded down the hallway and into the kitchen where he found his dad standing and having a smoke in their living room. Toby waited for a second and watched him from around the corner before a burning feeling started deep in his chest. Deep boiling anger overtook him. He heard the little imaginary voices in his head. Do it, do it, do it. He turned away and held his arms. He felt like he had no control over himself, unlike he did for the past few weeks since he got home from the hospital. He actually had complete thoughts for just moments before the chanting of the little voices in his head clouded him. Trigger warning, maybe? Maybe. Kill him, he wasn't there. He wasn't there, kill him, kill him. They continued on. Toby trembled. No, he wasn't going to do it. What was he? Going crazy? No, he won't kill anyone. He can't. He hated his father, but there was no way he was ever going to kill him. That was it, the last thought he had before he fell into an idle state once again. The influence of the voices in his head was too much. He began to silently walk up behind his father. He reached over the counter to the knife in the case. That's my dog, y'all. He gripped it in his hand. He felt the sensation take over his chest. He let out a snicker. He began laughing so hard he had to gasp for breath. His father turned around abruptly before he felt a brute force shove him to the floor. He grunted as the air was knocked out of him. What? He looked up at the boy who stood over him grasping the chicken knife. Chicken? The chicken knife? The chicken knife. The kitchen knife in his hand. Toby, what are you doing? He went to sit up and put his arms out in front of him in self-defense, but he knew it before he knew it, Toby was on top of him. He went to grab his neck, but his father reached out and blocked his hand by grabbing onto his wrist. Stop, get off me, he yelled, and with the other hand, he threw an off-centered punch towards Toby's shoulder. But he didn't stop. The look in Toby's eyes was not sane. It looked as if a demon had taken control over him. He yelled back and went to stab the knife into his father's chest. Trigger warning for sure. But his father blocked him and grabbed onto his wrist once again. He went to shove him back, but Toby kicked his feet out in front of him and landed a hard blow straight to his father's face. His father recoiled and pulled his arms away to cuff his face, but Toby got up and drove the knife straight into his shoulder. Hang on, wait. He stared at his father's smashed-in face and sat there twitching until a loud scream broke the silence. He looked over to see his mother standing a few feet away, covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Hang on, I'm getting text messages from my boyfriend. I swear to God, if it restarts me again, I'm gonna just like explain stuff in my own words if it does that. I swear. Okay, tears streaming down her face. Toby, she screamed. Why did you do that? She cried. Why? She screamed. Toby stood up and began to back away from his father's bloody corpse. He began to back out of the kitchen. He looked down at the blood-soaked bandages on his hands and looked up at his mother one last time before he had turned and ran out of the house. He ran into the garage and slammed his hand against the control panel on the wall, pushed the button to open the garage. So basically, he ran away from home and met up with Slenderman, I'm gonna guess. I'm not reading the rest of that because my voice is getting tired. But, either way, interesting. I learned how to say Ticci Toby, not Tissy. I guess that's a plus, right? Um, YouTube is the same as my user, even though nobody's on here. Okay, anyway, thank you guys for watching. This is probably the end. The only thing I'm gonna say is I absolutely adore him. I love that they add, different mental things with these because I get to learn more about them. Um, so I am going to look up how many things that he does have real quick, like mental issues. Okay, CIPA, which is just like he can't feel pain. Causes him to be numb to pain, basically. Schizophrenia, so he has like delusions, disorganized speech, bizarre behavior. He has Tourette's. Tics result in cracking of neck and joints. PTSD, which is the car accident that gave him that. And I'm going to also guess the abuse. So he kills people with hatchets. I do know that much. So he likes to decapitate people. So what makes him go insane is his schizophrenia, because his schizophrenia like takes over his mind and hears these voices that aren't actually there, that are telling him to do things. I know that much. So overall, there was no reason for them to explain the whole car accident thing. But he got in a car accident, didn't feel any pain, but his sister died. She was rushed to the hospital but didn't make it. So then after that happened, he went back to his house with his mom after recovering at the hospital. And and then after that, he had, my brain is breaking, found his father at his house waiting there for him. And then after that happened, he killed his father because he was going insane with him being there. Well, before that, they took him to a counselor, but he started zoning out and saw this figure that was standing underneath a post lamp. Not really post, but a lamp. A street lamp. That's what it is. Anyway, after that happens, and they take him to the counselor and all that, he goes back home and like can't sleep, and he has this nightmare where he sees his dead sister, and then Slenderman comes out of nowhere with all these kids. That's what I'm guessing he saw with Slenderman, because the whole way that they explained him. They didn't explain him well enough aside from the tendrils. That's kind of what gave it away. But aside from that, sorry if you keep seeing me doing this, like that. But either way, he goes insane and goes downstairs and gets these voices in his head. So he kills his dad, and then his mom goes insane about it and gets all mad at him. So he runs out and was released into the world. I don't know if there's more than that. You can read more if you'd like. I'm personally done right now. I might make another video about this if you guys like absolutely blow up this video, and at least I get a like. If I get, no, because my boyfriend will automatically like this, and probably Dennis. If I get 5 likes, because I'm not amazingly popular right now, then I will make a second part of this. Same goes for the rake vid. If you guys did not see the last video before the last one, then I recommend, because that one was really interesting too. So, anyway, I will see you guys next Thursday, and that's it. Bye!